Go to this computer. Okay. And let me share my screen as well. Okay. So before we get started here with our what we're going to be doing for the rest of the day today, there doesn't seem to be clear consensus about what we should do next year in terms of studying. A couple people, there are like 3 or 4 people who emailed me. One said, yes, let's try something new. And the 2 others said, it doesn't matter, whatever you want to do. So I'm inclined to keep on going with this because there's still, I think there's still be some interesting stuff to learn about our relationships with non-Jews. So I think it's fascinating to learn, to see in the context of the rabbis what their relationship was like, and then in our context today, when things we might seem in general that it might be easier or less threatening to relate to non-Jews, how we can apply this material today. And maybe there are some aspects of this material that still apply and some aspects that clearly do not apply. So I would vote to so if people want to just unmute themselves and say what they want to do or write in the chat, that would be great. So if we have more people saying no, let's do something else, I'm happy to do something else. But I'd rather just be. I'm inclined to keep on doing what we're doing. Continue. So Barbara says continue. Okay. Okay. Again, guys, I'm not pressuring anybody to have to say anything if they don't want to.
I just want to point out, I was suggesting that we take a mini break, do the 20 or so dafs that were unique and the various interests, and then go back to this. I wasn't say dropping this. That was my suggestion initially.
Okay. So we have 3 votes for change. We have 3 votes for continuing. So
you win. You won.
Well, no, just it doesn't. Anyway, think about it some more. Write it in the chat. Let's pick up now where we left off last time. Oops, what happened here? What happened? Just 1 second here. Let me figure this out. What did I do? These laptops. Oh, there it is. Oh, terrific. Now I have to go back and find the page. Technology is biting me today. Yeah. I appreciate your patience for this 61-year-old rabbi. Okay, here we are. Okay, share screen.
What was the line from Laurel and Hardy? Animal, now you've done it? Or what was that line?
That's okay. Before my time, Bess. They had sound movies.
I wrote all their material.
Yes. Okay. So it won't take us long to just start over again, even though we're at the 3rd paragraph. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So chapter 2 begins with this. One may not keep an animal in the inns of Gentiles because that is the Gentiles, are suspected of bestiality, right? So Jewish-owned animals are subject to Jewish law. So our animals should be treated in the way that we would want ourselves to be treated, that is, to follow the covenant and observe the mitzvot. So just as we need to be careful who we are cavorting with, so to our animals. since even Gentiles are prohibited from engaging in bestiality, a Jew who places his animal there is guilty of violating the prohibition. You shall not put a stumbling block before the blind, right? And we saw in the Gemara that the Gentiles usually want to be careful with their animals, but if they see a non-Gentile animal, hey, they can have they can take advantage. And a woman may not seclude herself with Gentiles because they are suspected of engaging in forbidden sexual relations. And any person may not seclude himself with Gentiles because they are suspected of bloodshed, right? So we have to be careful of hanging out with Gentiles. Women have to be careful because of rape, and any person because of murder. Suspected murder. So, okay, so we put Gentiles clear in this Mishnah that we don't think Gentiles are good people. And in fact, we think not only aren't they good people, that they're dangerous to be around. So now the Gemara is going to, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to do on my touchpad to get this back? Come on.
Try 2 fingers.
I am. The particular part of the screen I'm supposed to do the 2 fingers on?
Usually it's to the right. I don't know.
Come on. Michael, are you proficient in laptops, PC laptops? If a screen happens, what do I do? How do I get this to go back to? Oh, there it goes.
There you
Okay. Just, my goodness, why is this acting up today? Okay, with regard to the assumption, this is just so embarrassing. I don't know why this is happening to me today. With regard to the assumption that Gentiles are suspected of bestiality, the Gemara raises. So Michael just came in. I'm just doing what we did last time. That Gentiles are suspected of bestiality. The Gemara raises a contradiction from a Baraita. One may purchase an animal from Gentiles for use as an offering, and there's no concern that it might be unfit due to it being an animal that copulated with a person, or due to its being an animal that was the object of bestiality, or due to it having been set aside for idol worship, or due to the animal having been worshipped. So our Mishnah says Gentiles are suspected of bestiality. This Baraita says, no, you can buy an animal from them because they're not suspected of it. So now, how do you reconcile the two? The Gemara analyzes this ruling. Granted, there's no concern that the animal was set aside for idolatry or was itself worshipped. The reason is that if it is so that it was set aside, or if it is so that it was worshipped, then the Gentile would not have sold it to the Jew in the first place. Right? So in other words, you only suspect an animal, a Gentile animal, of bestiality or of idol worship if the Gentile had set it aside for that. But with regard to the possibility that it's an animal that copulated with a person, or an animal that was the object of bestiality, let one raise a concern in line with the ruling of the Mishnah. The Gemara explains, Rav Tachlichva says that Rav Shela bar Avina says, in the name of Rav, a Gentile protects and thereby spares his own animal so that it will not become barren. Since an act of bestiality may cause an animal to become barren, there is no concern that the Gentile engaged in immoral behavior with it. Therefore, one may use an animal purchased from a Gentile as an offering, right? So the Gentiles are bad people, but they care just as much about their property as we do. So there's no concern that Gentiles with their animals are going to do anything bad with them. So the Gemara asks, this works out well with regard to female animals, as they can become barren. But with regard to males, what is there to say? So they're getting into the nitty-gritty of bestiality with female animals and now male animals. Rav Kahana says Gentiles also refrain from engaging in bestiality with their male livestock, since doing so deteriorates the animal's flesh. That is, it makes them physically weaker.
Can we
Okay,
see the
this-
note? Can we see
Uh,
this?
Right. Okay, the note
Can't
here.
imagine what it says.
Yes, so right. So let's so due to it being an animal that copulated with a person, all such animals are rendered unfit for use as offerings. Although 2 witnesses are required to render the human offender liable to be punished by stoning, a single witness or even the owner himself is sufficient to render the animal forbidden. Okay. Set aside, some commentaries write that mere verbal designation of an animal for idol worship does not render it unfit for an offering. Okay, there's one thing as setting it aside, there's another thing until you actually worship it. Accordingly, it must be physically set aside and delivered to the priests who feed it vetches that are used for idol worship. Others hold that once it has been designated as an animal of idol worship, it is immediately rendered unfit and no action is necessary. So these are rabbis. Tosafot are German grandchildren of Rashi. Ravad is a French rabbi from the Provence, also around the same time. So just interesting, different parts of Europe have a different take on when such a thing becomes prohibited. So Rashi's grandchildren said, no, it's not prohibited until it's actually handed over to the priests. The Ravad says, no, it's prohibited as soon as it's verbally designated. Okay, and with regard to males, what is there to say about male animals? Male animals are rendered unfit as an offering if a person has engaged in bestiality with them. This is based on the fact that the disqualification of such animals is derived from verses which discuss a burnt offering, and only male animals can be brought as burnt offerings. Accordingly, the Gemara asks, why is there no concern that a Gentile may have engaged in bestiality with a male animal, an act that will not cause it to become barren? Right. So, okay. So those are the elaborating the questions here. So now, so we now see why Gentiles wouldn't commit bestiality with their animals, whether the animals are male or female, because it would be detrimental to the animal. They'd be ruining their property, and Gentiles don't want to ruin their property. Rather, the Gemara instead raises a contradiction from that which is taught in a Baraita. One may purchase an animal for use as an offering from their shepherd, that is a Gentile shepherd. The Gemara explains the apparent contradiction. In light of the ruling of the Mishnah, let us be concerned that perhaps he engaged in bestiality with the animal, as it does not belong to him, and therefore it should be prohibited to purchase an animal from Gentile shepherds. Okay, Gentile shepherds, apparently, according to this so far, are people who do not own the animals that they are shepherding. They are just hired to watch the animals graze in the field and make sure that some wild animal doesn't come and attack the flock. But while he's out there during the day, while the sheep are eating, shepherds will be shepherds. That's what this is suggesting. Okay, so again, so here they're trying this tack because the shepherd is not the owner of the sheep. Okay, so the Gemara answers, their shepherd is fearful of engaging in bestiality with the animals under his care due to the forfeit of his wages that would result if this were discovered. So a shepherd would be worried that the owner of the flock would figure out, I don't know, maybe the sheep is walking funny. Who knows how they figure out that something has happened to the sheep, and would blame the shepherd. And so the shepherd, even the shepherd who doesn't own the sheep, would not take the risk. Rather, the Gemara instead raises a contradiction. So we still have this ruling in the Mishnah that you're not supposed to leave your animal in the inn for suspect of bestiality. what kind of animals were generally offered for sacrifice? They would be cows, male or female, sheep, male or female, goats, male or female. Those are the main animals that were offered. And then there are birds that were offered, mainly doves and pigeons. Those are the main kind. I don't know about, though, there are kosher animals to eat, like ducks and geese, but I don't know if they were offered as sacrifice. The book of Leviticus talks about options. The wealthiest of people would bring a bull. Okay, so the bull is the most expensive animal. And then it goes down from there in terms of price. So you have bulls, you have, it depends on how old the bull is too, and never worked bulls. So they're all different categories of these animals. There are bulls, sheep, and goats. They're mentioned, and doves and pigeons are mentioned. And then the other option for the very poor is to bring a handful of grain. Okay, so those are the options that the book of Leviticus talks about, and also the book of Numbers for when it talks about the holidays, what is sacrificed. So every other animal that we eat is slaughtered in the same way as these animals or birds are slaughtered. Okay, so even though ducks and geese might not be listed in the Torah as being offered as a sacrifice, we kill them in the same way as other animals would be sacrificed. Okay, so those are the animals for sacrifice, and you need to buy them if you don't own a ranch yourself. You need to buy them from somebody in order for the pilgrimage festivals, right? So you'd be going to Jerusalem 3 times a year. You have to bring an animal with you if you can afford it for the sacrifice. Certainly for Passover, you bring a lamb for the Passover sacrifice. And there could be other times that you're going to Jerusalem for some other sacred or happy occasion that happened in your life. Just closing the door. And I've got it. And okay. So now we are shepherds. Okay. Rather, the Gemara instead raises a contradiction from that which is taught in a Baraita. What? Something is coming back on my screen. Why am I not signed in?
Me neither.
It's okay. It's my Google account, and I don't know why my Google account is doing this. Just 1 second, please. I don't know why my PC is doing this today.
Separation anxiety class is getting over.
I don't know. It's just, there we go. Okay, did it. Oh, yeah. Rather, this is, and it's being recorded too, so people can watch this and say, oh my goodness, what's going on here with this low-tech rabbi? Rather, the Gemara instead raises a contradiction from that which is taught in a Baraita. One may not deliver an animal to their shepherd, that is a Gentile shepherd. The Gemara explains the contradiction. Why may one not do so? Let us say that their shepherd is fearful due to the forfeit of his wages, and accordingly one should be permitted to give him an animal. The Gemara answers, with regard to themselves, that is, other Gentiles, as they are aware of each other's actions, they are fearful that they may be caught, and therefore will not engage in bestiality with an animal belonging to another Gentile. But with regard to ourselves, that is, Jews, as we are not aware of them and their behavior, they are not fearful of us. So in other words, Gentiles might be thinking, oh, we can take advantage of the Jews here because they don't know who we are, and we can take advantage of their animals. The Gemara notes that Rabbah said, this is in accordance with the adage that people say, just as the stylus etches script upon marble, a sinner knows his fellow sinner. That is, a transgressor is acutely aware of others who act in the same manner. So what does this mean? Background. The stylus etches script upon marble. The stylus is a carving instrument made of hard metal that was frequently used for engraving or embossing script in stone tablets. The use of a chisel was less common, as it was reserved for larger designs in which the rocks were carved into the desired shape. I think so. Stylus and marble go together, I think, is what the adage is teaching. Two things that go together. It's like two peas in a pod. Okay, so that's sinners are the peas in the pod, or the stylus and the marble, and so that people know who they can take advantage of. So here's the note: a sinner knows his fellow sinner. According to Rashi, the word ragala means a gossip who slanders others. As a slanderer himself, he's fearful of another gossip because he knows the extent of the turmoil that his statements can cause. In the adage, the marble, which is itself a hard substance, knows the strength of the stylus. Others explain that the ragala refers to one in charge of collecting taxes who understands the nature of tax evaders. A different version of the text reads, dagala, which means a liar or a cheat. Okay, so they're trying to figure out what the adage means. The Gemara raises a difficulty. If that is so, and the reason one may purchase an animal for use as an offering from a Gentile is that engaging in bestiality has a negative impact on the animal, then let us not purchase male animals from female Gentiles, as we should be concerned that perhaps she engaged in bestiality with it. This would not damage the animal or render it barren, and therefore there is no deterrent that would prevent a Gentile woman from doing so. The Gemara answers, since if she were to engage in bestiality, the animal would follow her around in public, she's afraid of others discovering her behavior. Okay, so an animal might do that, and then, so that's why a Gentile woman would not be engaging in bestiality, because the behavior will become known. The Gemara further asks, I'm sure this topic of bestiality is going to end soon. The Gemara further asks, but consider that which Rav Yosef teaches. A widow may not raise a dog due to the suspicion that she may engage in bestiality, and she may not allow a student of Torah to dwell as a lodger in her home. Granted, it makes sense that it's prohibited for her to have a student of Torah lodging in her home, as he is regarded as discreet in her eyes, so she will not be deterred from sinning with him. But with regard to a dog, since it would follow her around after she mates with it, she's afraid to engage in bestiality with it. Therefore, it should be permitted for her to raise a dog. Right? So in other words, Talmud students would be discreet. She wouldn't have to worry about the secret getting out. Dogs are not discreet. She would have to worry about that. So that's why she's not allowed to have a dog, but she could have. The argument could be that she could have a Torah scholar as a lodger. The Gemara answers, since it will also follow her around in a case when she throws at a piece of meat, people will say the fact that it's following her is due to the meat she threw at it, and they will not suspect her bestiality. Consequently, she will not be deterred from transgressing, right? In other words, with stray cats, stray dogs, feed it once, it's always going to be following you. So people are going to think you fed the animal, not think the worst, that you had bestiality. The Gemara asks, with regard to female animals with females, what's the reason that we do not permit them to be secluded with each other? Mar Ukva Bar Chama says it's because Gentiles frequent the wives of others, and on occasion, the Gentile does not find her, and he finds the animal and engages in bestiality with it instead. Gentiles are lustful, prefer people, but will take anything. Leave it at that. They'll take anything. And if you wish,
I'll never think of Mary as little lamb.
yeah, I'm not going to repeat what Michael just said. And if you wish, say instead, even when he finds his wife, just a second, there's something in the chat. Was this really a big problem in those times? That's a good question, Lori. Yes. I really don't know. I would imagine it was a big enough question for the rabbis to deal with it, right? So in other words, one logical argument would be, why did the Torah teach the laws that it taught, if not that they were common elements of society at the time? Why teach something brand new that people have no idea what you're talking about? So here, this must be something that happened, and it was common enough that people knew about it, and it was a significant factor in relations with non-Jews. Now, it could be that this is all just stereotype. In other words, I'm thinking about Nazi propaganda against the Jews, right? So the fact that Jews are out for money, and all the cartoons that the Nazis would have of Jews with big noses sitting on stacks of money, things like that. So is this perpetrating a falsehood in a way similar to Nazi propaganda did of the Jews, right? So based on something that may be, right, like everybody knows at the time, Rothschild was the Jewish banking family. So then thinking that all Jews are Rothschilds, if you want to hate Jews, you can say that. So maybe there was one Gentile who was known for engaging in bestiality. So maybe the rabbi said all Gentiles engage in bestiality because of one guy. So it's possible that what we have here is the opposite of anti-Semitism, anti-Gentilism. So that is quite possible. Or it could be that this is actually something that was very common, and the rabbis are just responding to something very common.
But
Michael.
the Torah at least does specifically mention bestiality as a no-no.
Yes, it is.
So-
Yes, it does. Yes. So
Must have been something.
So the Torah in the 18th chapter of Leviticus does mention that bestiality is a forbidden kind of intimacy. So it was something that was done. So, so I think then that you could say that this was common enough that people wouldn't say, wow, I never thought of that before. So people were aware. Okay. Okay, so Gentiles will take advantage of other women, the wives of others, and if they can't find a wife, they'll take a woman, they'll take an animal. And if you wish, say instead, even when he finds the wife, he also engages in bestiality with the animal. As the master said, the animal of a Jew is more appealing to Gentiles than their own wives. That's right. So that I would say is anti-Gentilism. Why would an animal of a Jew be more appealing to a Gentile than his own wife? As Rabbi Yochanan says, at the time when the snake came upon Eve, at the time of the sin of her eating from the tree of knowledge, it infected her with moral contamination. And this contamination lingers in all human beings. Now, this is fascinating stuff, right? Because the Adam and Eve story and the snake and the apple, or whatever fruit it was, is an important story in Christian thought, right? Original sin, right? And it's not as important. It's not like an integral philosophical, societal, theological story for Judaism. But since the rabbis of the land of Israel in the time of the Talmud did have encounters with their Gentile counterparts, that is the church fathers, and they knew what the church fathers were studying in their academies about the Bible, it's possible that some of the studies went back and forth. So if Christians are talking about Adam and Eve and the snake, then Jews will talk about it too. But we'll just add our perspective to the story. Okay, so there are, like I've talked before about Abraham bringing Isaac up the mountain to potentially sacrifice him there. So there's the Christian idea of that story is that Abraham did sacrifice Isaac, and then the miracle was that the angel and God brought Isaac back to life. So it's the first example of resurrection, and therefore an example like Jesus was not unique. Okay, so there, just as the rabbis find sources back in the Torah to prop up things that they are teaching, so to the Christians look back to the Bible for references that will prop up their teaching, right? They read Isaiah and the idea of the future king of Israel coming from what should be translated as a young woman, but the Christians translate as virgin. So there, the virgin birth of a new king. So Isaiah is important for Christianity to give the background, the proof text for Jesus. And then if you have a story that resurrection occurred before, then it's not so out of the ordinary to then see that Jesus was resurrected also. Okay, so I'm just saying stories go back and forth between the Christians and the Jews for different purposes. So here's an Adam and Eve and the snake story, right? So remember, this is the talking snake that is convincing Eve to eat of the fruit that both Adam and Eve are forbidden to eat. From the one tree of all the trees in the garden is supposed to stay away from this one, and the snake entices Eve to eat of it, and Eve then entices Adam to eat of it too, and from that, society is ruined, right? Original sin, moral depravity, whatever it is. So then there are also stories about what Eve and the snake did together. So there are those talk about bestiality. There are midrashim about what Eve and the snake did together. Okay. So as Rabbi Yochanan says, at the time when the snake came upon Eve, at the time of the sin of her eating from the tree of knowledge, it infected her with moral contamination. And this contamination lingers in all human beings. The Gemara asks, if that is so, a Jew should also be suspected of engaging in bestiality. Right? So the Gemara raises an interesting, if everybody is morally depraved, equally morally depraved, why should we only be worried about leaving our animals in an inn because perhaps a Gentile is going to take advantage of it? We should be just as afraid that a Jew could engage in bestiality with it too. The Gemara answers, with regard to the Jewish people who stood at Mount Sinai and received the Torah, their contamination ended. Whereas in the case of Gentiles who did not stand at Mount Sinai and receive the Torah, their contamination has not ended. Okay, so here, Lori, I think, is another example of the rabbinic anti-Gentilism coming out. Okay, so that we have the experience of Mount Sinai, which is a uniquely Jewish experience that rids us. It was a morally purifying experience. It rid us of contamination, whereas Gentiles do not have a way to rid themselves of contamination. So no, we should never suspect Jews of bestiality, but we should suspect Gentiles of bestiality. Okay, so now the Gemara inquires now to the halacha in the case of a bird. In other words, we're worried about bestiality with animals. What about doing that with birds? A dilemma was raised before the sages. With regard to birds, what's the halacha? are Gentiles suspected of engaging in bestiality with birds? The Gemara suggests, come and hear a proof that they are suspected of doing so. As Rav Yehuda says, that Shmuel says in the name of Rabbi Hanina, I once saw a Gentile who bought a goose in the market, engaged in bestiality with it, strangled it, roasted it, and then ate it. And similarly, Rabbi Yirmiyah of Difti says, I saw a certain Arab who bought a thigh of meat from the market and carved a space in it that was the size necessary to allow for penetration. Subsequently, he penetrated it, roasted it, and ate it. These incidents demonstrate that Gentiles are suspected of immoral conduct with fowl. Okay, so it's Gentiles and Arabs who are suspected of such gross behavior. Excuse me. Okay, so the Gemara cites another resolution of the apparent contradiction between the Mishnah, which rules that Gentiles are suspected of bestiality, and the Baraita, which permits an animal purchased from Gentiles to be sacrificed as an offering. Ravina said that it's not difficult. This Mishnah issues its ruling with regard to the halacha ab initio, that is, from the beginning, lechatchila, and while that Baraita is referring to the halacha after the fact. All right, so from the beginning, you're not supposed to do this, but if you had, it's okay. Right, so it's better not to do something. So there are some laws that are like that. Better not to do that, but if it happens, then it's okay. Yeah, it's not so terrible. Okay, so in other words, like better not to to make a drop of milk fall into your huge pot of chicken soup. Don't do that intentionally from the beginning. But if it happens by mistake, then it's okay. Don't worry about it. Okay, that's the idea here, right? It's wrong, but it's not wrong that it's not fixable or it doesn't ruin anything. Okay, so you shouldn't buy an animal from a Gentile, but if you do, it's okay. Okay, so the Gemara asks, and from where do you say that there is a difference in this case between ab initio and after the fact? As we learned in the Mishnah, a woman may not seclude herself with them because they are suspected of engaging in forbidden sexual intercourse, right, with Gentiles. And one can raise a contradiction from another Mishnah. With regard to a woman who was imprisoned by Gentiles, if she was imprisoned due to monetary matters, she is permitted to her husband even if he is a priest, as there is no concern that she was raped. If she was imprisoned due to a capital offense, she's forbidden to her husband if he is a priest, as the captors would not restrain themselves. Okay. I'm sorry, folks. My internet. Okay. It looks like I have good internet, but I'm sorry. So that it looks so here this paragraph is what I got up to here about capital. So a Jewish woman is arrested. If she's arrested for a monetary crime, the assumption is she's going to be in jail for a short time. She's going to get out of jail because she's going the fine is going to be paid. So Gentile prison guards are not going to have their way with her. Whereas if a Jewish woman is arrested, I'm going to try to change my internet connection. Just once, bear with me, please. Okay, so this should work better. If a Jewish woman is arrested for a capital crime, murder, she's going to be in jail a long time, and there's not going to be enough money for the community maybe to get her out, or maybe that's not even an option. So then prison guards are going to have their way with her. So that's the idea here that the Gemara is suggesting, that it depends what the Jewish woman is arrested for and what assumptions you can make about her. So the first clause of the Mishnah in Ketubot rules that a woman who was imprisoned in seclusion with Gentiles is not assumed to have engaged in intercourse with them. This apparently contradicts the statement of the Mishnah here, which rules that a woman may not seclude herself with Gentiles. The Gemara continues, rather, isn't it correct to conclude from here that there is a difference for us between ab initio, as in the Mishnah here, and after the fact, as in the Mishnah of Ketubot? The Gemara rejects this conclusion. From where can this be proven? Perhaps I could actually say to you, generally, even after the fact, one may not assume that a woman who was secluded with a Gentile did not engage in intercourse with him. And here in the Mishnah, in Ketubot, this is the reason that she is permitted to her husband, even after having been imprisoned. Since her husband might not agree to pay if his wife was raped, the Gentiles, fearful of raping her due to the potential loss of his money. Prison guards are up on what Jews will do, and therefore that affects their behavior with their captives. So there are a bunch of assumptions then, both from the Jewish community about Gentiles and apparently in the Gentile community about Jews. So a little bit more, the Gemara adds, know that this is the explanation, as the latter clause of that Mishnah teaches, if she was imprisoned due to a capital offense, she is forbidden to her husband. Clearly, the difference is that in this case, there's no incentive for the Gentiles to leave her unharmed. The Gemara concludes, and nothing more needs discussion, as this is certainly the correct interpretation of that Mishnah. Now, why can't I continue here? I can't. Folks, I'm really sorry. I don't know. It's like one technical problem on top of another technical problem, and I'm really sorry about this. Couldn't preview the file. Problem loading the page. We have to stop here for today. I'm really sorry. It's a 11:15, 15 minutes early. I'm sorry about that. Share with me by email your your thoughts about what to study when we pick up again in September. It seems like we're split votes now, 3-3, about either starting something new or continuing this topic. So just let me know, send me an email. And I wish everybody a good rest of the week, a good summer. Hope everybody enjoys. If you're going anywhere, safe travels, and look forward to picking up Talmud study again in September.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
It was a great class this year.
Okay, thank you.